everybody. Thank you, Barbara, for that very, very nice introduction. Thank you, Tony and CODAWorks, for having this conference. It's pretty cool. My name, well, when Tony asked, would you speak, I said yes, and then she said, what do you want to call it? And I thought about it. I was with my son in Shanghai in this big development by a pond, and he was super excited because he had found a spider web. There's a bunch of bottles floating in this little pond, and he had found a spider web where they had basically tethered across the water, and this little spider was catching all these bugs. And I thought, oh, a sense of wonder, but a desire for change. Like, that summed up that moment for my son and for us when we found this little spider creating this environment, but it also kind of sums up the work that we do, the way we approach what we do. We're fascinated by nature, and new materials, new technologies are really interesting to us, but we're wary of the amount of waste that society creates along the way. And we want to find a way to reuse that waste or change the way we think about technology or products and materials so that we can create new things. So, a sense of wonder and desire for change, and I have a clicker. Tell you a little bit more about my studio and who we are. So, my name's Jason. I grew up in Wisconsin. I went to the University of Minnesota where I studied architecture and history. But really, I just spent my time finding weird stuff in the woods and welding it together in the West Bank of the campus. Until my last year, where I was awarded the Sullivan Grant, which gave me a year to study abroad. I went to Denmark to study with DIS in the Academy of Fine Arts. There I met a German lighting designer named Ingo Mauer, who showed me the beauty of lights and the narrative power of objects. And I went to work for him for a couple of years until I decided to get my master's in architecture. So I went to Harvard to get that, and that's where I met Leslie. Leslie was born in Los Angeles but grew up in Taipei. She's from a family of builders and is very clear thinking and very meticulous. She went to Columbia to get her architecture degree, undergrad architecture degree, and then went to Harvard to get her master's. Right after, she went straight to Harvard to get her master's, and that's where we met. After we graduated, we decided to move to New York together and went to work for different architecture firms. Leslie worked for Stephen Holt, focused on museums, and I went to work for SOM, primarily focused on hotels. And that was great. We learned a lot. We worked a lot and we learned a lot. But after a while, we got dissatisfied with the nature of architecture, and we wanted to spend our time creating objects that could tell their own story, that could explore materials more directly, have a larger narrative that applies more directly to real-world problems and social problems. So about 10 years ago, almost to the day, we formed our own little studio called StudioKCA. And we have been making things ever since. We make about 2 or 3 sculptures a year. I think we're up to 27 objects over the last 10 years, spread out all over the place, kind of pursuing this idea of materials, technology, and nature, and where science and technology meet. And I thought I chose 7. I grabbed 7 to talk about today. I think I have enough time to talk about 7 of them. Starting with the very first one Leslie and I ever did, called Head in the Clouds. This is on Governor's Island in New York. We actually, where we live and where our studio is, we can see Governor's Island. And we can also see, between the studio and the house, we can see garbage boxes full of plastic bottles. So there's a group called Figment that put out a competition to create a pavilion on Governor's Island for their event. And we thought this would be a great opportunity for us to bring to light the amount of plastic waste in our cities in kind of a creative way. And so we came up with this idea for the Head in the Clouds Pavilion. We did some math and we found out that 57,680 bottles an hour are thrown away in New York City alone. So that's just in New York City, every hour, that many bottles are thrown away. And we proposed building a cloud made out of exactly that number of bottles collected from all businesses and schools and areas in New York City to build this pavilion. And that's what we did. We had all the outside of the cloud are made from milk bottles that we collected from coffee shops and schools, and all the inside bottles are made from water bottles that we collected, cleaned, and then filled with a little bit of water. And we did that because it changes the nature of the light inside, but also because the structure for the cloud is actually aluminum diagrid shaped like a football with about 180 connections. So it's basically like a basket, a metal basket. And the water in the bottles attached to this basket give us enough ballast so that we actually didn't need a footing at all. All of this just sits on the ground very lightly, so when we pulled it off, we didn't have to deal with anything going into the ground. And there was a party inside. I think they said 300,000 or 400,000 people came to see it, which was pretty great at the time, and it really kind of started or it didn't start the conversation, but it added to kind of give us a visual example of really how much waste we're producing and what we can do with it. And that's just a detail of the wall. That's how we did the exterior. And surprisingly, it's made out of plastic and aluminum, but we built it in the middle of a tropical storm. It survived several storms, so it's a stable structure made out of waste. A year or so later, we did the first piece. We've done a couple pieces with NASA and the European Space Agency. They had seen what we had done with water, with the cloud, and they had, right at the same time, they were engaged in the Rosetta mission, which was this really cool. NASA does really interesting experiments. They were in the middle of a 10-year project where they were sending a satellite to meet a comet 40 million miles away. And it was a 10-year mission to land the satellite on the comet. And at the time, they thought that the comet was a dirty snowball, so they wanted to kind of that's what they thought. They thought a comet crashed into the Earth, and because it crashed into the Earth, that's why we have water and life on Earth. We thought this was really cool. They wanted us to create something to celebrate it. At the same time, the World Science Festival was happening in New York, and so they wanted something on Brooklyn Bridge Park that would kind of bring this idea, this kind of science, to a larger public audience. So we proposed building a 1 to 2,000 scale version of what we thought the comet might look like. At that time, they had like a fuzzy image of it. And of course, we were way off, but and because we had a limited budget, so half of it, the comet we built, and the other half we used the reflection to give us our 1 to 2,000 scale. And the tail of the comet is this like very shallow temporary pool that we built with the steel, and that just kind of comes in and plops down. And people really like this thing. During the day, it was this like hulking metal thing. Oh, also we got to team up with Nifog, the technology company that makes misting systems. They were really awesome. We built a customized mister inside with a 600-watt light LED fixture that kind of glows. So at night, during the day, it's this like hulking mass that's misting and it makes a hissing sound because of the water hitting the steel. And then over the course of the day, it changes in nature, becomes this kind of glowing mass. And then at night, it really takes on a different life. Oops, that's a rough image. But this is made very simply. It's actually steel panels. We used torches on site. We heated up the relief pattern that we laser cut, and then we just pushed them in by hand. That's how we got the craters. After that, that's a close-up of what that looks like. And the misting system's interesting. After that, we did a couple more pieces for NASA. This one's at the Huntington. They came to us and asked, they said, we've got a system, we got a series of low Earth orbit satellites that are collecting data on all different parts of nature. And we want people to somehow interact with that data through sound. So we want to hear the sounds of space. And Leslie and I thought that's insane and very interesting. It's like, well, sounds in space? So, but then when we think about it, we thought, well, when you're a kid, you put a shell up to your ear and your parents say, oh, you can hear the ocean. So we proposed, what if we made you a giant shell out of steel, aluminum, that you could walk into and actually hear the sounds of space? And that's what we did. We built a massive Nautilus shell, 45-foot clear span in the middle. We got to work with a really great sound artist, Shane Mirbeck, who's a sound artist and an acoustic engineer at Arup. And so you kind of curve your way into the shell, and inside is a bunch of speakers, and so it's basically like a surround sound system of speakers. And he gave a sound to each of the satellites in space overhead, and then programmed them so that they would play in real time. So when you're standing in the middle of the shell, you look up through the middle, which is open. The middle of it, we left it open, looking at the sky, listening to sounds, and hearing the sounds of satellites in space that you can't see. That's the outer shell. It was at the Huntington for the last, I think, 8 years. I think it just came down for a new exhibit. But here's curving, and that's Leslie and I kind of walking into the middle. It's our nephew. That's the inside. It's also aluminum. The structure is just basically redundancy. We used a lot of clamps to get the redundancy that we needed for the stability. And then we perforated it with that kind of star pattern because it helped give us the curvature when you kind of come into it. But it also reduced the acoustic reverb. We had to get the panelization down to like some percentage so that we would work with the sound inside. And then at night, it's right next to at the Huntington, it's right next to the cactus garden. So kind of, we just put a simple light inside and kind of glowed like a lantern. This we just recently finished. Speaking about glowing and light, this is in Oklahoma City. It's called Light as a Feather. We were in the park when we were working on this proposal, and this actually was in Scissortail Park in Oklahoma City. Scissortail is a famous bird in Oklahoma. This is a massive park that they built right next to the Thunder Stadium. And we were in a park in Brooklyn Bridge with our son, and we scared a bunch of birds up. Birds flew away, big flap wings, and a little feather came down and landed on his shoe. And it was a tiny little feather, but it was this kind of curve, like lightly touching the ground. And we thought, oh, this is taking flight. Like this park is going to launch the development of this this whole side of Oklahoma City. It kind of faces the city that's there. Let's build Taking Flight and call it Taking Flight Light as a Feather. And that's what we did. This is 48 feet long. It weighs 7 tons, but it has a very light touch to the ground. We built the custom lights inside of a curved track. We worked with UAP on this. And then the paint is really cool. It should actually be cool to the touch, because if you add, there's really interesting white paints that are being developed to reduce the heat island effect and actually cool the air around the thing that's being built. So this was our first, not our last, but our first attempt at understanding what we can do with paint in the coating. And people seem to like it. That's the curvature. Those are intentional. Those are not mistakes. Those are intentional. Panel covers. And then at night, people like to stand by this thing. And it has a pretty good glow. And we also worked with Davis Partnership, Jeremy Pivnik, on, he found us a really great company in England that builds kind of these elegant light solutions. So we had them build the lights for us. At night, it kind of glows like that. Light as a feather. Light as a feather. Next project is in Hopkins, Minnesota. We work with light a lot. This is the first one we've ever done with actually solar power. This piece is completely off of the grid. It's powered by the solar panels that you can see on the roof. Hopkins, Minnesota is a tiny town. It's a suburb of Minneapolis, Twin Cities area. And they were redeveloping their main artery. Bolton and Mank did the redesign, and they wanted a spot in the center of this new artery that they could have like a gathering place. And it's a nice city, but it doesn't have like a big draw. But what they do have is their night sky. They have, you can look up at their skies, and you have to be in Hopkins to see their stars. And so we thought, well, we could cut a piece of that out. We can map the stars on the summer solstice and give them their stars as a place-making device and as a way to kind of mark their spot in the world. So we used, NASA has a whole bunch of maps of stars, and they go thousands and thousands of miles up, so you can actually find all the stars at every single day in the past and in the future. And this is called night and day. So during these perforated panels are the star patterns above Hopkins on the summer solstice. During the day, the light shines through that pattern to give you stars in the ground, while the middle disk is actually the sunlight. That collects light, collects power during the day. That's what this looks like. The structure here, we worked with Silman on the structure, actually very light for what it actually weighs. That's what it looks like underneath. And then when you look up, you get the whole star pattern. And that middle sunlight at night glows and creates a place. So you get night during the day, you get day during the night. So we call it night and day. And they seem to like it. That's the structure. Actually, the interesting part is the way that we solved the foundation. It looks complicated, but it made all of the posts and all of the rods super, super small. So that was important to us that we kind of made this disc floating. That's my brother. The last one, okay, this is a 2-for-1. So in 2018, City of Bruges in Belgium asked us to create a piece for their triennial based around the idea of the liquid city. And we thought this was really interesting. They wanted to see how cities interacted, and they wanted this idea of liquid city. And we thought, well, how do cities interact with the ocean, which for us was the liquid city? And unfortunately, that happens a lot through waste. There's 150 million tons of plastic in the ocean right now. We add 8 million tons a year into the ocean, and that doesn't go away. So pound for pound, there's more plastic in the ocean than any other thing in the ocean. Pound for pound, more than whales, right? Whales are the biggest thing in the ocean, but pound for pound, there's more plastic in the ocean than whales. So we wanted to create a piece that brought this issue, this problem, to the city, to the people that may or may not see it every day if they're not living on the ocean. So we went to the most remote part of the planet that we could find in the Pacific, which was the southeast tip of the Big Island in Hawaii. There's nobody out there, only horses, nobody lives there, but we found everything you can think of that's plastic that you use on a daily basis, toothbrushes, everything, and from all different countries. It all ends up on this little 8-mile stretch. And we said, okay, we're going to collect as much plastic as we can in a given set of time, and we're going to build the biggest whale that we can and put it in the middle of Bruges, call it Skyscraper. And they said, okay, do it. And we did it. So we made 26 trips. We worked with the Hawaii Wildlife Fund, the Kauai Surf Riders, and the local surf riders group. Collected all this plastic. Collected it. Cleaned it. Sorted it. All the blues, we didn't paint anything. All of it just the ocean over time. There's pieces that are from the 70s and pieces that are from yesterday. And then created this structure. We worked with Rob Otani from Thornton Tomasetti to create a structure that could be transported and broke apart into panels and reassembled into this breaching whale. And this one is 34 feet tall out of the water, about 1 meter in the water. It uses temporary ballast on the outriggers on the base. And that's what it looks like when it's assembled. we put it right in the middle of Bruges. Bruges is a UNESCO World Heritage City. It's beautiful, it's elegant, and right in the middle near the Jan van Eyck, we put this massive whale breaching out of the water. We call it the Bruges whale skyscraper. You can see everything, and kids liked it. You can find toothbrushes and everything you can think of that's plastic you can find in the ocean. We used it to build the whale. That's what it looks like. I think there's a video. Let's try. Oh, yeah. So Droner is a Belgian film company, and they made a bunch of films. We don't really show this one, but I think it gives a good sense of the scale of this. Everything that we could, I mean, everything's in the ocean, which is crazy. So we built this one, and then a year later, the mayor of the city of Kaohsiung. Kaohsiung is the largest port city in Taiwan. It's a huge port city. He saw it, and he liked. First, he was sad that there was that much plastic in the ocean, but he was also really proud of the fact that his city has a very robust recycling program. So he wanted some way to highlight this issue, but also celebrate their success in their city. And they asked us to build another one, and our only caveat was, we said, okay, we'll do that, but we have to do it 100% there. We want to build it there, we want to work with their city, we want to work with their people, with their group. It has to be done there, and it has to be built there for them. And he said, okay. So we kind of made camp in a hotel and worked for a couple months building this version. This is almost 1-to-1 scale for the whale. It's 13 meters high, so 9 stories tall. 9 stories tall, about 3 or 4 meters into the water. It weighs 60 tons. We ended up using almost, I think, 15 tons of plastic, all collected through citywide efforts to collect the plastic and cleaned. And we built it at the abandoned school across the way. That's going to be demoed and rebuilt. So we actually built the entire thing across the road. But the same story. It's all there, and we used it to build another piece. At night, just kind of satellites. I think they said 3 million people saw this, which is insane to me. But it was pretty successful for getting the word out and having a conversation about plastic waste. You could see the scale, the people on the bridge. And I think I have a B-roll of, so there's a video here that we haven't edited, so it's going to be rough, and I sound like a dork, but I'll play it because it kind of shows. Oh, if there's no sound, then that makes it easier. This is going to be, yeah, so it's good that there's no sound, because you don't have to listen to me say Kaohsiung 10 times. We call this one Ai Jing, which is whale in love. It goes into the Love River. That's the river that we built it in, so we call it Whale in Love. That's the deputy mayor. We led these massive collection efforts, and people really got behind it. It's just so much plastic, and it just kept coming, and we were sorting it and sorting it. That's Leslie's voice now. Easier to listen to. Construction waste is an amazing thing too. There's so much construction waste. So we found a couple thousand buckets. So we started using buckets for the white. And toys. We started introducing other colors to this a little bit. You can see there's green to notice the blue. We got to mess around a little bit more with coloration. Nothing is colored. It's all the color that it is. Yeah, it's like a mosaic. Every piece we cut, every piece we shape, and then you kind of build it up. And we were lucky because the people we worked with here were great. And we kind of worked nonstop to get it done. That's the structure we built, all the steel there as well. That's a plasma torch. I thought that was awesome. Yeah, and we just hammered it out. We've got a really good relationship with Arcasia, which is a large architecture firm in Taiwan that we work with occasionally.
And we're working with a
Oh, you don't want to hear me speak. That's
local teams, local engineers.
That's the structure. Also, this one we never used foundations. We tried not to use foundations, so we figured out other ways to do it. This one I thought was pretty cool. And I think you'll see in this video, we actually used two 500-ton cranes. So we built the whole thing on land, 100% steel, all on land like that. And then we picked it up with two 500-ton cranes, yeah. Put it in the middle of the street, picked it up with another one, and dropped it in the water. Or gently put it in the water. So, and then so the outriggers on the structure have those posts, and what we did is we used temporary concrete ballast, and we basically loaded it up like donuts until we got the right weight. And I think obviously it's several tons of weight on each of the outriggers, but it was stable. Yeah, it's big. And kids, the same effect in Bruges. The kids come and they say, "Oh, look, I have that toy at home." And you're like, "Yeah, well, what do you do with the toy after you're done with it?" So it's an idea about kind of considering what happens with what we use and how we use it. Even dogs, I guess. Yes. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. You want to ask questions? Oh, sure. I don't know if I put slide. We have a couple of things we're working on for next year, obviously. Lexington is going to be exciting. Yes?
I'm from Lexington, I've seen it. So
Oh.
we look forward to you coming.
That's next year. That's a cool piece. That'll be a lot of fun.
What's it going to look like?
So what?
What is it going to look like? Sorry. Repeat the question.
They asked about, we're working on a piece right now for next year in Lexington, Kentucky. Lexington's building a really beautiful park. And we're going to put on the north side of this park, we're going to put a big sculpture. And it's called First Impressions. And when we went down to Lexington, almost everybody said the same thing. They said, well, the grass is greener, the horses run faster, and the bourbon is sweeter because of the limestone in the earth. And limestone is really just calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate is just shells, fossilized shells. And so we thought we would bring to the surface the unsung hero, which is the maclerite shell, which is the fossil that you find a lot of in Lexington. So we're building a 50-foot diameter maclerite shell canted like this to become like an outdoor classroom in the park. And then in each of the way that the fossil is that kind of segmented. And so then in each of the segments in between, we're putting one piece of history over the course of the last 480 million years that relates to Lexington. So there's like really cool stuff like Beethoven was writing his first symphony when the two guys found Lexington. They were on the hill looking down, almost in the same year that Beethoven was writing his first piece. So like, there's a lot of interesting connections. Most of the history is underwater, and then we left a bunch blank because there's history to be written, and that's a big piece of working on. I think we're supposed to be done with that at the end of next year, so summer of next year. Yeah, First Impressions. So that's what it's called. The name's funny, I think. Any other questions?
Hi, Jason.
Hi.
I just read that 100% of seabirds in Monterey Bay have microplastics in their intestines,
Yeah.
and that plastic takes 496 years to decompose. So in the intimacy and scale of what you've created with plastic, what are your insights into how to slow down, or stop the massive amount of plastic that we use every day? We know it.
Yeah.
I mean, Trader Joe's is like the biggest offender.
Plastic is ubiquitous, and actually it's not only in the birds, it's in us too. There's microplastics in everything, which is insane. How do we slow it down? Well, you have to make conscious decisions every day. So like when we started 10 years ago on the cloud, that's when we stopped using plastic bottles ourselves. So it just feels small, like, well, I'm the only person in the world doing it, what does it matter? But it does matter, if everybody would do that, then you could kind of have a wave of change. And the other way to do it is to say, okay, the waste is there, what do we do with it? Microplastics are hard there's a lot of them too, like we pull big pieces, but certainly in the sand, there's probably tons and tons of tiny little plastic particles. And I don't know how you could use that, but maybe if you could sift them out somehow, you could reform them into sheets. There's a company in London doing something like that, using recycled plastic to make like 4x8 panels for construction use. Yeah, it's a combination of limiting what you use and reusing what you do use, and hopefully that you can get change through that.
We got time, 2-3 more.
Okay, then I did well on timing.
What kind of budgets do you typically work with?
Yeah, well, good question. Never
Sorry,
enough. Never enough is the good answer. It's never enough. But a couple of million to tens of thousands, I think, is our range. It's pretty big. That's our range. There's a certain level that you just can't do what you want to do, and that's frustrating. But we try to do the best that we can with what we have every time.
And to embark on a project of what you just showed, which is so exciting, what type of timeline is needed for you for the collection and the actual concept development and the installation?
Well, that ties into budget too. So the Bruges whale took about a year. Typically, a project takes about a year to do. The giant whale that we did in Taiwan, we did in 4 months. Which is shocking, but it's because the city got behind us in an army, and we really just pushed. So it was bigger. Also, the cantilever, I don't know if you can notice, but the cantilever is way more aggressive on the one in Kaohsiung. That has nothing to do with timing, but that was something that we worked on for that piece. Yeah, so I think a year is a good chunk of time to a lot to build something like that. It takes a lot to incorporate the public into what you're doing, which we think is really important, but it creates another layer of complexity to the entire process, and usually that means adding a layer of time. Yeah.
Jason, you just kind of answered what I was going to ask. So many of these projects have a lot of community engagement. And when you begin to visualize a project, when do you add the community into your planning process?
Well, it's always there in the beginning. We're always like, oh, this we can do with the people. we try to have, I mean, it's easy to have conversations with the community, which is important and necessary. Actually, to engage folks in assembly means that we have to, in fabrication, understand what parts are easy enough for random people off the street to do. So it's usually at that point when we're trying to figure out how to build the structure, we can figure out what part of the structure we can engage the public in a kind of a direct, immediate, participatory way. Otherwise, but always in the beginning, it's the conversations with the city, it's conversations with the government agency, it's conversations with the people that are going to have this in their home or near their house or in their city, so that it's their piece in the end.
One more.
Have you approached anybody like Procter & Gamble who makes cheer to sponsor you, to say, hey, we're doing something, which they aren't, because cheer is actually taking all the cardboard boxes out of the grocery stores and replacing them with big plastic bottles, which just makes me nuts. But have you approached anybody like that to say, hey, if we're doing it, maybe somebody else will?
So that is an awesome, the short answer is no. All we do, we're always, because we're kind of always focused on what we're building, we're really terrible at that level of engagement in the kind of the company-wide company-wide driven support. But we would welcome that as part of the process. Only time we started talking with, we did a project in Brazil with Waldeck Jonipa for the Made event that he does there, and he asked us to build a thing. We built a plastic piece, and there we started talking to Nestle, because Nestle has a massive water producing plant, and they were interested in supporting a piece on their campus that would somehow show how we could use their waste products in a more productive way. But that's the closest we've gotten to kind of trying to engage companies directly in funding what we do.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.